Okay, today I'll be talking about My Name is Red by Orhan Pamuk and translated by, oh god, this is going to be difficult, Erdağ Göknar? I don't know if that's correct. Translated by, hopefully I said that correctly, Erdağ Göknar. This is the second Orhan Pamuk book that I have read. The first being The Black Book, and this one has firmly cemented for me Orhan Pamuk as a novelist, where I will definitely read all of their novels because I've really enjoyed this, and just the amount that it gave me to think about is quite really incredible, and that it was all wrapped up in a story that was also compelling was great. One of the things when I read translated books that I'm really looking for is also an insight into cultures and ways of viewing the world that I don't usually get from a lot of American or English books, because a lot of those books are going to naturally reinforce an English or American way of looking at things. So to step outside of that and see other cultures and the way they think, particularly Muslim culture. This book is set in the Ottoman Empire, is really nice, and one of the greatest things about translated fiction is to just get sort of a different insight into one where I don't necessarily have to agree with everything that they say, but that I can certainly appreciate why they do things and the effectiveness that came from it. So in that sense, that was why I read this book. I liked The Black Book. I liked that it gave me a lot to think about. This was just the next one that I picked up. To be dead honest with you, I picked up this one in particular because it was on sale at the time. But like I said, I will be getting more of his books, and I will be reading through all of them. To whom would I recommend this book? Very, very simply, just about everyone. Unless you... I think I would just recommend this book to anybody. Great book. Lots to think about, lots to reflect about, lots of insights. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, plot summary. I'm thinking so much about like the themes and whatnot that I'm forgetting to even just talk about the basic summary of the plot. So this is historical fiction, which for the record, I'm not a huge fan of. It takes place, I believe, in the 16th century in the Ottoman Empire. And it follows, it shifts through perspectives, but primarily the main character is named Black, and he returns to Istanbul after being exiled for 12 years to help his enişte, I think it's pronounced, finish a book. And the illustrations in this book are supposedly going to be done in the Franco style, which is to say portraiture, which is very blasphemous. And the book starts with one of the illustrators working on the book. They're actually miniaturists being murdered by one of his brethren, and so then the plot then becomes Black trying to uncover the murderer while also trying to get his uncle's daughter to notice him, because the reason he was exiled in the first place was because he proposed to her and she rejected him. So, but the husband that she married has been gone for 4 years, so he feels that she's available and he wants to make moves on her. So that's the plot of the book. Like I said, it balances having so much going on thematically with actually having a plot that makes sense that you can follow. So this is where I kind of say, like, there's not really... I think that you can be just about any type of reader and enjoy the book and get something from reading it. So that sums up. To get into the pros and the cons... I don't usually like historical fiction, and the reason I don't like it is because it's often difficult to balance what is fact with what is being sort of exaggerated, and you can end up taking a lot of historical figures and just bending who they were to fit the narrative, and I'm not a fan of that. But with this book in particular, apparently it was meticulously researched, but specifically the miniaturists. And one of the big themes of this book is how miniaturists see going blind as sort of the ultimate end goal of their work. The ultimate proof of their dedication to their craft is blindness, having become blind working on these miniatures. And it was such a challenge to me to think, could anybody really think that. And I did some research, and from what I gathered, I didn't do a lot of research. No, nobody in the miniaturists really like valued blindness so much that they would blind themselves that we know of. It was mostly made up for the book, but the rest of the book is fairly historically accurate. But that sort of balance between what you can take from it, in terms of the historical accuracy versus what is metaphorical, can be difficult to follow. And I think this book, for me, struck a decent balance where I think outside of that, and outside of obviously some of the characters and whatnot, it invites you to be interested into the history without, to my knowledge, using a lot of historical names and historical figures and being like, wink, wink, look, it's, famous historical figure, Leonardo da Vinci. I'm not a huge fan of that type of storytelling. I already mentioned the way that it melds the, still having that strong core narrative with the thematic depth, and the amount of themes and the book is juggling is something that I really appreciate. And if you go back to my the School of Night review, I talk about how you can have a theme and then different characters should ideally represent different expressions of that theme, so that throughout the book it's not just the main character's exploration of that theme, but you get other sides to the story. It's what keeps a book from feeling like a sermon and more of an exploration of a topic, because you, as an author, give multiple sides, give multiple takes, and even though obviously your viewpoint character, being the character that the audience is with the most, is going to be the one that they're inherently going to sympathize with the most, you still give the other opposing arguments a chance, give them their say, and ideally, the more strength you give their arguments, the stronger the main character's own beliefs become. If you just create a bunch of straw men and then have the main character overcome those straw men, then what you end up with is a really sort of weak theme. And what this book does, using art as sort of a gateway between not just art but also culture, and the influence of Western culture on the East and the vanishing of Eastern culture is, and the way that you have different mouthpieces of that you really get to explore different sides, and you get to see that it's not all right or all wrong, that there is good reason to worry that your own cultural identity is going to be sunk beneath the tides of change, or that what is coming, even outside of terms of better or worse, just is inherently different, and that your values and your way of seeing the world is kind of culture, but there's a little bit more nuance there, is in danger. Your sort of identity, not just culturally, but religiously and so on and so forth, is at stake. And the book captures the nuance and the multiple perspectives of that so well, that in much the same way that the Black Book questioned identity from so many different angles, here too you get art from so many different angles, and I just really, really appreciate it. I would call that a huge pro to the book's favor. And another thing that I would say that the book does really well in terms of the romance, I find Shakure, I don't know how to pronounce her name, I'm guessing it's Shakure, her to be an interesting character in the sense that she makes some moves that I find really, really fucking annoying, to be quite frank with you. But at the same time, to have a romance in a story in fiction where it's a divorced mother and her interest is primarily in her children, that as much as there's this romance aspect to the story, any man that she marries, or whomever she ends up joining with, is ultimately going to be second to her bond with her children. And I just, you don't really see that a whole lot in fiction, to my knowledge. That sort of emphasis on a mother's relationship to her children. Usually the romance is so focused on the two lovers that this sort of more realistic aspect, this more pragmatic aspect, never comes into play. So the balance between her as being sort of a more competent person, a loving person, but not necessarily lost in the love, but who still makes some really fucking dumbass choices in the story. It's very, very human. And, Black as a main character, honestly, in terms of, like, if this were your sort of action fantasy or whatever type story, kind of sucks. Whenever there's, like, an action scene, he's almost certain to get his ass kicked. He's just awful. But at the same time, it makes him an interesting character in the sense that he's not perfect. He's not your typical action hero. He's not going to come out and save the day. He's not going to overpower people. He's not super going to win by his wits. He's kind of just a guy at the end of it all. Really working, like, even in terms of the art, the miniaturist aspect, he's not a professional miniaturist in the same way that all these people that he's working with are. So even professionally speaking, he is a sort of pleb among, literal masters of the craft, which makes him an interesting point of view character and definitely atypical in that sense. But of course, no book is perfect. So in terms of cons, I feel like it took me a while to get the hang of how the book is structured. So it's first person, but it jumps between points of view, and who the person narrating is actually established at the start of it. So, like, I am a corpse, and then the next chapter maybe like I am Black, and then one chapter might be I Shikure, and they call me this. So not knowing that, just coming into the book and then having it jump point of view, especially since there are chapters that you find out are being told from a storyteller in a coffee house, where people will draw a picture and then he will narrate these stories as if he's this thing. So, like, I think the second chapter in the book is like, I am a dog. And it's like, okay, is this literally a dog? Is this being told from the point of view of a dog? Okay, it seems to be told from a point of view of, who says human things, something about coffee, I don't know. And then the next one is I am a tree, and you start to get the picture. And then, gradually you start to understand, okay, this is a storyteller, this is what's going on. But it takes a while to get, it took me a while to really understand sort of the flow and the pacing of how, like, just it's structured. Once I did, I didn't have a problem with it, but it was kind of rough to get into from the start. In terms of another con, I feel like a lot of this book does go into history, and for me, that's incredibly fascinating. I love it. For like a lot of the Ottoman Empire and the conversations about art and how this certain style of painting came to be. But I can also see how if you're if you're just here for the story, the plot, the what happens, and you don't really care about the history or the thematic depth, then it can be kind of obnoxious. So your mileage may vary on that. And the last thing that I would really say, and I hesitate to call this a con, but between both the Black Book and My Name is Red, I feel like Orhan Pamuk really falls into that category of author for me, where his work is so close. Like, I enjoy everything about it, but when it comes to like why I would say I really, really like it. Maybe I even love it, but I would never call it a favorite. And I think at that point, it's just a matter of taste, because I think from, sort of, all art is subjective. So when I say from an objective metric, I don't mean in terms of, like, obviously objective, he is objectively better or whatever. But when I go through sort of the subjective metrics of things that I like, things that appeal to me, he sort of ticks off every single box. And yet at the end of the day, I just don't feel much emotional attachment to his characters. I think that they're more interesting than they are people that I really feel are like alive and empathize with and, really connect to. So, but that's like, it's such a personal thing, I think, that it's difficult for me to call it a con, even though this is all technically subjective. To call it a con, it's more a personal con than it is something that if you asked me to say, like, academically or whatever, why do you feel this way? I would really struggle to say that. And I think it really is just, at the end of the day, that personal taste. Like, there's just something about his characters that keeps me from forming that connective bond that I do with, like, Murakami's characters or Nosgard's characters. But I don't think that that's the kind of thing that anybody should let hesitate to pick it up. So, right, themes. God, this is where we get into full spoiler territory, so if you want to read the book, I really recommend just go read it. But this is where we just get into like, oh my god, I could talk for days. Art. So in order, like, I'm really just going to focus down my themes on a few things here, because there's so much going on in this book that to talk about all of it, you know, as in all my other reviews, there's so many more themes in books than I talk about. I just hit a point where my brain kind of overloads. And besides, to talk about all of them would end up pushing these videos into absurdly long lengths anyway. So one of the things that I really want to talk about thematically, and one of the things that's a huge theme in the book, is art and the cultural identity of art. And it reminds me a lot of Killing Commendatore by Murakami, in the sense, and please bear with me. I know I mention Murakami every single time, and I'm mentioning Murakami again here, but please bear with me. I promise this isn't just me standing Murakami. Killing Commendatore made me really appreciate, I already kind of like knew it, but it helped me give word to this idea of, and I've talked about it a lot, sort of blank space as part of the artistic medium, of how Japanese painters and Japanese styles use white and use space to evoke emotions through absence. And as Westerners, and as Western style of painting is very much focused on realistically capturing things, especially portraiture, it's very common for certain Westerners to look down on this style of art, this more abstract art, and see it as lesser because it's less quantifiable. It's less easy to objectively say, you know, well, it's better or worse, because it's relying on your emotional reaction to the art. There's not a sort of master by which to compare it, you know. And by master, I don't mean a person. I mean like an original. So like you can take a painting of a person and then compare it to the original person, and, you know, have multiple people do a painting and then say which painting more closely resembles that person is the, you know, quote unquote objectively better painting, whatever. And in that sense, something that has this more abstract concept that relies more on your own interpretation of that blank space, your own feelings towards it, it becomes a lot more difficult to quantify, and therefore more challenging to you know, appreciate in terms of this instinct that we all have to measure things against one another, to sort of understand it relative to other art, because it doesn't exist to be relative to anything else. It's more about how you feel about it. So in that sense, here with Orhan Pamuk and My Name is Red, what we have is Ottoman art and Ottoman miniature art, which again just has and is again put in juxtaposition to the Franco style, the portraiture style, and how it's a completely different way of approaching art and approaching the idea of art and what art is meant to accomplish, in the sense that you have the Franco style, or okay, let me back up a second. It's important to understand sort of the background of the way the Ottoman Empire treated art at this time. And this is, again, it's from the book, so I'm assuming that this is historically accurate. If it's not, I apologize. But the way the book describes it is to do art is actually really questionable whether or not it's okay or not, because to create in that way, to draw, to create, is to creation is the realm of Allah. So to draw in that way is to transgress into Allah's realm, to try and take something that is, you know, belongs strictly to the realm of God, and to then imitate it. So what a lot of their art is in accompaniment to text, to books, usually like the Quran. So art and artists are less about their own expression and their own style, and more about repetition and replicating the style of others such that they end up in an absence of style. And this so goes against the sort of Western idea of self-expression that is so central to everything. But from their point of view, as I think they expertly put it, the book expertly puts it in the storyteller's concept or story about a tree, I Am a Tree, the idea is not to capture a literal tree that you can replicate and put anywhere, but to capture the essence of things. It's not about replicating a scene, a person, in the way that like a portrait clearly is a replication of a person. It's about, or, capturing a tree. It's about capturing the essence of what a thing is. I mean, if you know anything about like Plato's forms, to try and capture like the form of a tree, like what is at the heart of the thing, rather than necessarily just creating an imitation of the thing. And there's actually an interesting argument that they make in that the sort of portrait style, this realistic portrayal of things is actually very shallow, because all it is functionally just capturing a literal interpretation of the world without actually trying to look at the thing or understanding the thing's essence, what lies at the core of the thing. It's just recreating it. And there's also this aspect of putting the humans at the center of the frame, and the way that takes away from, like, for them, the only thing at the center of your life should be Allah. So to take human and put them at the center of your frame is to kind of usurp Allah and his position in the world. And it is a very... it did convince me in the sense that there, even though I'm not religious, to appreciate that there is a sort of self-congratulatory air to portraits, in that idea of, putting something as the center, in the way that we are a very selfish society, a very self-centered society, and we don't think a lot about others and things like that. So just a lot of the observations like that on art, I really appreciated in the story. The idea that, that it's from Allah's view instead of the view down on earth, which means that things are not proportionally sized because all things are, the same in Allah's eyes, or people are not visually distinct from one another in a way that you can, you might recognize people by different trades based off their clothing or their turbans, but you won't be able to say, you won't be able to identify an individual from the image, or that a painting can be like a cross-section of a building and you can see inside the building. These are sort of, when I looked up a lot of these drawings and I was looking at them, it's not art that I would say that I particularly care for, that I know of as somebody who knows very, very little about actual art. But the way that they nonetheless describe it helps me understand and appreciate a different point of view and a different perspective on art, and on what art can and should be, and questioning this sort of uniformity of our own perceptions of what art is and what art should be. And this is where I come back to like Killing Commendatore. Like I said, they both, Killing Commendatore with Japanese art, My Name is Red with the art of the Ottoman miniaturists and the Herat school specifically. I'm sure I butchered that. How they're exploring different ways that they can use art to do different things, accomplish different things. It's just something that I've never really talked about. I've never really found it outside of books, and this is why just reading translated books is so enjoyable for me, because I get such a better view of the world and different perspectives and approaches. And to see this, at this time when this Franco style is coming in, it's not just a question of which is better, which is worse, but because the Franco style is so dominant and spreading so quickly, it's a complete submersion of not just the art visually in terms of what's being painted, but also the culture and that viewpoint and that way of looking at the world. that has sort of become so dominant, and the way that this sort of monoculture that arises out of it, and the loss of some of that variety, is really something lamentable. And then, though the book takes an interesting turn at the very end, where it turns out the next sultan doesn't care at all for art and actually has artists prosecuted. And it even says that the sort of great debate just kind of ended without an answer because because of this. There just was no answer because the next guy said fuck art. And a lot of the reason that he said that was because of religion, and religion's relationship with art is another big theme in this book, and it's a big theme throughout history. As anybody who knows much about art history will know better than I will, but I know, like, in Europe and whatnot during the medieval ages, in the reign of the Catholic Church, art was very much controlled in the things that you could and couldn't paint, and questions of modesty and things like that. Different from the Muslim Empire, but also with its own restraints. And that's kind of the thing about this book is there's so much that I want to talk about, but at the same time, the more I talk about it, the more I feel like I'm not capturing even remotely the dimensions that go on that it made me think about to this. And I end up feeling like I'm doing the book a bit of a disservice. So to that end, I'm actually going to end it here, because I am just sort of caught in this odd space where the more I talk, the more I feel like I'm not giving the book credit. And I want people to read this book. I've never heard of this author, even though he's a Nobel Prize winner. I've never heard of Orhan Pamuk until somebody, if you go back into the Black Book and why I chose the Black Book, there was a post on Reddit where they correctly identified the themes of Wind Up Bird Chronicle and compared it to the Black Book. And if not for that post, I would never have picked up this author. So I want more people to read this. I want more people to recognize this guy, recognize this author, get his name out there, because he is worth your time. So that's where I'm going to cut this off, because hopefully I've whetted your appetite. I've made you go, yeah, that sounds interesting. Go out, pick it up, give it a try, please. So next time I'm probably going to read... Next up, I'm definitely going to revisit Killing Commendatore. I'm not going to do a video on that one. That book is too personal to me. And then after that, I have several books lined up that I'm stoked to get to. So see you then.